Hey everyone, this is Britton. I'm back. Sorry I meant to post last week that I wasn't going to be there. I did tell you guys the week before, if you watched the video, I was on vacation. I meant to just do a little post and then I lost track of time. So anyway, I am back. For new members, I always go live every Wednesday. Hopefully you know that by now. I go live at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So every Wednesday I'll try to be live talking about educational issues. I always tell you guys that if you guys ask questions in the group, anywhere in the group, post them in a comment. Your questions will be the priority. I'll try to answer those for you. The purpose of this group is to teach you how to raise your children for greatness. It's a different educational model. And it's based on the series, The Art of Raising Children for Greatness. We have 5 books coming. 2 are out. So one is Revealing School, one is Education. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I mentioned in Revealing School. There's actually a little chapter on it, but it's coming into the talk of character, which is going to be the next book, which we're going to release hopefully it looks like next month. So that is coming really fast. I'm going to kind of mold those two together today. And really the heart of what separates an elite education or a great education from the classical public school education. There's 2 different theories of theories of thought. One is that the foundation is called classical conditioning. It is based on a pseudo-scientific view or worldview that comes out of evolution. It comes out of this idea that there is no God and that God has died. Not just, they don't believe he ever existed. They mean that the idea of God is passing away from human beings, from our worldview. We're going to enter a new scientific age where God, the idea of God is dead, and their dream is that someday we won't even know of a God or think of a God. We believe that everything is just scientific and material. So we talked about this last week, so if it sounds like a repeat, I'm just getting you up to speed. But today I want to talk about specifically a guy named Pavlov. Pavlov is the foundation of educational psychology. When I was in college, this is one of the first classes we took in educational psychology, was all about Pavlov. You've probably heard about him. Pavlov, he set up this experiment where he wanted to see if he could take natural instincts, things that people don't have control over. So we have two layers, right? We have the subconscious, we have kind of instinctual. You know, if somebody hits you in the knee, that knee flies forward, you don't control that. If you're hungry, your stomach starts to growl, you didn't control that. You didn't tell it to growl, you have no choice over that. And they wanted to see if they could take responses like that are beyond our control, so like instinctive responses, and they wanted to see if they could use that to condition learned responses. So in other words, they could program us in such a way that we would have no ability to do otherwise than what we were kind of programmed to do. Obeying them would become like your stomach growling. It would just become part of the program. And so what he did is he set up this experiment with these dogs. Hopefully you've heard of this, Pavlov. And he would feed them, and they would naturally salivate. As soon as they saw their food, they'd start to salivate, right? And then he'd give them their food dish, and they'd eat. That is a normal thing. Dogs need salivation. That's good for the dog. That's a normal response. That's not conditioning or programming. What Pavlov then did is he started to ring a bell, so that every time he gave the dogs food, they would associate the ringing of the bell with food. And so eventually he took away the food, and the dogs continued to salivate. So this is a natural response, salivation, responding to an artificial environment, the bell, an artificial condition that they programmed, that he came up with. And I remember when I learned this in college, I thought, well, what does this have to do with educational psychology? What does this have to do with children and learning? And it's really scary. I hope you guys have read Revealing School. It's a thick, fat, it's so important. It's a thick, fat book, so important because most of us, when we're homeschooling, we're doing exactly what the public schools are doing. When we're reading books on education, a lot of these modern, books and stuff like that, they come from a godless worldview that comes out of this idea that we are no more than we're no more than matter, and we're nothing more than a chemical reaction. Like our behavior is nothing more than a chemical reaction responding to its environment. There's some programming that comes down through hereditary, but there's no real free choice. You're either acting on instinct or acting on the programming of the conditions around you, your environment, your circumstances. So they believe very on that if they could take children at a very early age into a public school system, they could begin to program human beings because they don't believe in free choice. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in good and evil. Again, we talked about this last week, like the implications of their worldview, that there is no good and evil, that everything is a matter of programming. So you may be the most horrific person in the world. You're a serial killer. You're not evil in their worldview. You're simply, your programming went wrong. Something in your environment triggered this bad programming. And so when they see a kid who's not doing well in school or is acting up or behavior problems, they don't say, man, this kid has a heart issue here. They would say, okay, this kid, he has a chemical imbalance. There's something wrong with his physical makeup. Or they would say there's something wrong with his environment. And so that's how they treat everything. This is very contrary to our worldview, to raising children for greatness. We come from a biblical worldview. We believe that human beings have a choice. You go back to Cain and Abel in that first generation when Cain murders his brother. God doesn't say, well, there's something wrong with you, Cain, with your environment. We need to tweak this, or you need this medication. He says, Cain, you can choose to do good and you'll be accepted. It's a choice. We have free will. And this is so important with our kids too, because we'll raise them all in the same environment, and you'll see that, and a lot of times, again, we'll attribute to that personality. There's just something wrong with that personality. It's not the spirit, because according to Pavlov's worldview, there is no spirit. Everything is physical. Everything is chemical. But we would say with kids have free will, and we can influence them, and we have a lot of influence as parents, but we can't control them. We can't perfectly program them. And so with the traditional, with the classical education, they believe that they can program. And when the program is going haywire, like if you look at the public school system, it's just a mess. Their worldview doesn't change. So they don't go backwards and say, okay, we've made a mistake here. They will continue to promote their worldview and say, we need to get the children younger. That's the problem. We don't have enough control. We don't have control of the environment to start conditioning them earlier. We need longer. We need to be able to remove the family's influence, the church's influence. Once we can perfectly control their environment, we can program human beings. Chemical reactions, complex chemical reactions is what they see us as. Okay, so that's what's so scary about public education. I do talk about this in here, and a lot of times you think, okay, but that's not really going on. I went to public school, they try to teach me math and stuff. The math and stuff like that, that's kind of important. That's part of public education. Those aren't the real lessons. What they're really trying to do is program reflexive obedience. And there's so many things that are part of public education. When you read this book, you realize everything, even from a school dance, is there for a reason. It's not an accident. It's all a part of programming conditioned behavior. And they believe that just like the dog who drools to the bell, who has no control over it. And it doesn't even make sense. Like, if you look at it, that's ridiculous. The dog's drooling to a sound. The sound can't feed his stomach. Makes no sense. It's a conditioned response. They believe they can do that to children, and that they can establish habits and pattern behavior so that even when you're teaching them at home different things intellectually, it doesn't matter because your child's behavior will be conditioned to respond a certain way. That's what's so scary and so tyrannical about public education. But it's also a failed worldview. It's not working. They're not properly programming the kids. They're going to greater and greater, more extreme measures to program children earlier. But again, at the end of the day, children are free agents. Okay. So where does that imply? So when we talk about raising children for greatness, we believe that man and God are free moral agents, like we talked about, and we believe that they can be influenced, and we believe it's not a matter of chemicals, it's not a matter of environment, it's about reaching the child's heart. And in the next book, Raising Children for Greatness, book 3, that's going to be on character, we're going to talk about how you can capture the heart of your child. That it doesn't matter the environment. Once you capture the heart, they're gonna go as far as you want. You won't have to micromanage them. You're not gonna have to babysit them all the time. You capture their heart, you inspire it for greatness, and it will go forward. It's not a matter of conditioning or programming your child. So many of the books you're getting right now on education, stuff like that, have that background that if you can just get the right system in place, if you can have the right stimuli, the right reward system, all that stuff, you can just create the perfect environment. You can create a perfect kid. It's not true. It's contrary to everything that we believe. We believe that education is an art, that there are certain practices and principles that work better than others, but we don't believe it's perfect. I have 7 children so far. At the end of the day, my kids are free moral agents. I can't guarantee that they'll be this or that, but I can certainly influence it. And so I just want you to be aware of that going forward. Just remember that your kids are free moral agents. There's not a perfect system that you can create for them. You're going to have to get in the trenches and fight this daily battle with them, trying to capture their heart, which is their free will. They can choose to obey you. They can choose to honor you. There's no way to condition that, but there are certainly, the best practices. Like all art, there are certain principles and things that work more often than not. That's what we're going to be talking about in this next book. It's going to be talking about how to train your children's character for greatness. Not program them, not condition them. There's no way to condition a child for greatness. We are here to inspire them, how to train them, to give them the tools that they need. And that's the best that we can do. At the end of the day, they have free will. You look at David, King David, a man after God's own heart, certainly made a lot of mistakes in life. But if you look at the epic failure in his son Solomon, just epic failure, it's really tragic. It's really tragic. At the end of the day, man is a free moral agent. Solomon started off as a great, wise king who loved God and ended up as an abomination. He destroyed the nation of Israel. He was the last great king of Israel. The empire then split, and he started to worship false gods. He worshipped, Ishtar and stuff like that. Just totally degenerate. So there is no guarantee. I want you to know that. When we talk about raising children for greatness, this is not a program. This is not a 1, 2, 3 step guarantee. People say, well, I implemented this and it didn't quite work. It's an art. I've been doing jujitsu. I talk about that so much with the art. Like I do jujitsu. Jujitsu is like submission wrestling. It's like chokes and you're submission wrestling. We'll teach a choke. And you have to perfect that art, and you perfect that art, and you do it so many times, and each day it's tough. But the first time you teach a new student that technique, they'll try to choke somebody or do it the right way. It won't work for them. Or they do that arm bar, it may not work for them because the technique is proper. You do the proper arm bar, it's going to work. But your opponent is moving. He's got his own strength, his own abilities. There's a counter for it. It's the same with your children. They're free agents. At the end of the day, you have to capture their free will. You have to get them to opt in voluntarily. To consent to what you're doing. They have to get on board. And the major part of what you have to do is inspire their spirit, their character, to get on board with your program. I hope that makes sense. And we'll talk about this more later, but I just wanted to finish that up from last week. I didn't know if I did a perfect job like tying that all together. But the difference in our philosophy is that your kid is free will. And you have to inspire, capture that free will to get on board with this movement. You cannot drag your children to greatness. Your kids have to choose. They have to opt in. They have to want it. There's no perfect program that we can program this stuff. Even at prep school, and I talk about how they've mastered the art of raising children for greatness, how they do a phenomenal job. They have such a high success rate because they understand the art. They're very good at what they do. There are kids who go to prep school and on day one, they just won't check in and they end up getting expelled a few weeks later. And there's nothing the school can do if the kid doesn't opt in. You can't force your child to want to be good, to want to be great. All right, but don't let that discourage you because I'm going to give you the tools that work, that the prep schools use. This classical conditioning model it's actually anti-science. It's because it denies the existence of the spirit, which is a reality. And so it doesn't work. If you look at the public school system for all their systems, their budgets, and their methods, and their professional teachers, it's just a disaster because it denies the existence of free will. Okay, guys, that's all I have for today. Next week, I'm going to try to get back to something a little bit more tangible where I wanted to really address that world view because it's becoming more prominent. And we talked about how just watched the video last time, how they're starting to, they don't believe in evil. So they're starting to look at the most sick, perverse, wicked people in our society. And their view is that they're not actually bad people. They need treatment. They're actually the victims. They're the victim of circumstance, of bad instinct or biology, and they need treatment. It's a very counter worldview to what we believe. We believe in good and evil. And as they continue to accept evil as a natural state, as a biological condition, as a chemical imbalance, we're just seeing evil just thrive and just take over our society. So we have to get back to understanding the spirit, how to capture the spirit, what the spirit is, and free will. All right, guys, if you want to know more about the psychological conditioning that goes on in public education. Guys, there's so many things that you don't know about, like what is the purpose of a public school dance? It's not just some social gathering that they thought would be fun. There is a specific scientific purpose to that. Everything that the public schools do, we think of it as this just crazy, broken down system. It's not. It's actually very high tech. They actually know what they're doing. They are trying to condition you. It doesn't work, obviously, a lot of times, but some of it does work. I mean, some of it, they have established a lot of behavior patterns and habits that you have to be aware of. And I only say that because I don't want you to to duplicate that in your own home. As you're trying to give your kids an elite education from home, you have to let go of a lot of the things in public school that you thought were benign, that you thought, oh, that's just something fun, or it's just a technique or something like that. No, it all has a purpose. Yeah, it is scary. So if you want to know more about that, read Revealing School. You have to purge yourself of the public system, public education system, philosophy, all of it, straight all the way to Pavlov. You have to just flush that out of your system before you can begin raising your children for greatness. Education, and then character will be out. Character is the most important. Of all these books I'm going to write, character is the most important, because you have to capture your child's heart, their soul, their being, to make any of this work. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. I'll be back next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. That's Mountain Standard Time. You'll have to look up what time zone that is for you, but I'll be here every week on Wednesday. Talk to you later.